All right, so I want to hold in by the Book of Leviticus, chapter 18. Again, we're going to the Book of Leviticus, chapter 18. We're in verse 5, and this is part 62. There'll be a part 63, 64, I'm sure. Again, we're holding by Book of Leviticus, chapter 18, verse 5. Torah says, Shmartem es hukai es mishpatai, sher yase oisam Adam v'chabem ani Hashem. So here the Torah says, you shall therefore keep my ordinances, things that don't make sense, and my judgments that do make sense, which if a man do, he shall live in them. I am the eternal. So we've been speaking the last number of weeks, Orach Chaim HaKadosh, and we're gonna with the Rabbeinu B'chai, and we're gonna work our way through. We've already spoken about 4 different ways to understand what it means to live by them. Right, the last way we saw was you had certain people that merited to live, and death did not affect them, i.e., someone like Elijah the prophet, someone like what's his name, Charuch, right? They went up in a fire. In a fire. Chanuch went into Gan Eden, in the paradise, before he died, right? So you had 2 people. You had a few people that death did not affect it. So we spoke about that last week. So now we're going to continue as the Rabbeinu B'chai here says. He says again, he's going on the end of the verse, where the end of the verse says, it says, V'chai b'hem ani Hashem, right? V'chai b'hem means to live in them. I am the Lord. So he says, I got another 4, right? I got another 4 over here. One, and he said there are 4 types of life that a person merits by keeping Torah mitzvahs. So what's one of them? One of them is life like a person will normally live, and his soul will be established in his body, right? As long as the body's healthy, because the body's not healthy, and the person could die. So basically, the soul will go out of the body. But what's the first level? Or what's the first type? The fact that he says the soul goes in the body, and the soul allows the body to live, right? to continue to function. Now, obviously, if it's going to be weak or other things are going to happen, then that's going to be a problem, right? That'll certainly be a problem. But he says first level is, again, that the body continues and stays healthy, right? Now, what's he talking about here? He's talking about everyday life, right? All the things that we go through, right? Everyday life. He's talking about health, right? And staying healthy. But again, what's the whole point? He says there are 4 different things, 4 different types of life, let's say, that a person can merit in establishing Torah and mitzvahs and keeping Torah and mitzvahs. Now, that's very interesting, because he says this is the whole thing that has to do with keeping Torah and mitzvahs. Now, what does that have to do with health? What does that have to do with everyday health? So someone will say, Well, if you don't have everyday health, what's going to happen? Right? What will happen? If you don't have everyday health, it's going to be very hard to keep anything. Right? Now, some people are, I would say, healthier, let's say healthier than others. But if a person eats relatively healthy, take care of their body, so to speak, that gives the soul the ability to keep Torah mitzvahs better. Now, a person can eat junk and a person can be unhealthy, etc. Okay. So let's say they don't have major, health problems. You say, okay, but if a person, can exercise a little bit, eat properly, let's say, so the body's healthier. If the body's healthier, in general, the mind should work better. Right? In other words, if the body's good, the mind is good, in theory. If a person isn't as healthy, right? Very simply, let's say they're overweight, they're obese, or whatever. So what do you have? The body can't function as well. Can lead to diabetes, can lead to other things, okay. But the body will not function as well. And if the body doesn't function as well, then the question is, how can the soul function? The soul will also not function as well. Because again, you remember, a person is a hybrid body and soul. If a person is hybrid body and soul, basically the body itself, if a person is healthy, right, then a person can learn Torah better, can keep mitzvahs better. If a person, God forbid, isn't, doesn't mean they can't keep Torah mitzvahs. No, they can keep Torah mitzvahs. It's going to be harder for them. Why is it going to be harder? Because again, they get out of breath easily. They're more tired. Right? A person eats, a lot of junk and sugar, right? And all that. A person goes up and down, right? A person's like on a high, then they get tired, right? You get people that drink, I don't know, unbelievable amounts of coffee a day, right? To keep themselves going. So, coffee, obviously is a stimulant. Coffee can certainly help you, stay awake. Can also make you crash also, right? So, yeah, there are certain, a person drinks, I don't know, more than 3-4 cups of coffee a day, I think. I think that's what the stat was. Let me see. Right, how many cups of coffee unhealthy to drink in a day? 4. Yeah, if you consume more than 400 milligrams of caffeine per day, about 4 cups of coffee is considered unhealthy. Okay. Yeah, so what's the issue? It's caffeine. Right, it can have a neurological effect, cause jitters, heighten anxiety, nervousness, sleep disruption, you can't sleep, right? Because you're all hyped up. It can also give you, all these good things, give you acid reflux, upset stomach, nausea, heart palpitations, okay. Again, it's gonna depend how much a person drinks also, right? 8-ounce cup, let's say, is 95 milligrams of caffeine. You got a mug, 100 milligrams of caffeine. A mug of filter coffee is 140. I mean, okay, so you're getting high, very good. Again, but do people drink at least 3 cups of coffee a day? Probably most people. I would think most people do. I'd be interested to find out. Uh, yeah, what's the average? 1 billion people drink coffee a day. Wow. It's about 66% of adults. That makes sense. A lot of people drink coffee. Yeah, 2.2 billion cups daily, at least in the US. That's a lot of coffee. Yeah, it's definitely a lot of coffee. So 66%. Okay. Now, again, a couple cups, probably not bad. Right? You're drinking more than that, 4 cups, probably unhealthy. Okay. Now, some people, what's the first thing you're gonna do? Person wakes up, makes blessings, whatever, goes to the bathroom, makes blessings, very good. They want to be awake. So what are they gonna do? They're gonna have coffee in the morning, right? Just gonna give them like a jolt, I guess, to the system, right? They'll drink coffee. Is it common? It's common. It's definitely common, right? The only question is how much should a person drink that makes it unhealthy? Okay, yeah, that was the question. But in general, if we have good eating habits, we exercise a little bit during the week, hopefully. Yeah, get the endorphins going. That's good for the body. It's good for the soul, right? And the reason is because if a person's relatively healthy, things go smoother. If a person is not as healthy, again, I'm not saying, like drink like a fiend, what do you call it? Exercise like a fiend, right? Eat only healthy. Can a person cheat on it? Yeah. Can a person enjoy it? Sure. But again, we've spoken about this many times, within reason. Within reason. Shabbos, yeah, we indulge a little bit more. Okay. Now, most people know, and I'll just mention this in passing, that, I grew up, as a kid amongst adults, and I heard many, many times, that people would say that if a person doesn't have their health, right, they have nothing. Which is a true statement. It's not a lie, right? That for sure is a true statement. Why? Because the person has health issues. Again, depending on what the health issues are, right? They suffer in different ways. Yeah. Why? Again, can't get around as much. You feel weak. I remember once, whatever, a number of years ago, wasn't so many, whatever, let's say not so many years ago. So, I learned, like most places in Israel, built on hills, right? You have flat areas. You got down south, in the Negev, right? You got very flat areas. You got Tel Aviv's pretty flat, but most places, like where I live and a few other places I live, they're built like on the side of a mountain, right? So they're hills. They're hills. So I remember, whatever, where I learned, it's like, a bunch of stores, you have to walk down like a whole bunch of steps, to get there. It's about 60 steps, or someone told me 67 steps from the bottom, from this area, from the bottom to the top. You go all the way to the bottom, and my Rebbe's neighborhood, you got like 300 and, I don't know, it's like 380 steps or something like that. So I happened to be once a number of years ago, whatever, a number of years ago. Someone told me this. I happened to be at one time like at the bottom of this hill. So I said, okay, let me walk up the hill. I'm gonna wait for a bus, but let me walk up the hill. Let's see if it's really 380 steps. Yeah, as I started walking, I'm like 125, 126. Like I already started to get winded by, okay, after 100, it's already pretty good. Right. But if you're walking like a certain amount of steps, let's say it's even 20 steps, 30 steps, and a person gets winded, it means the person's out of shape. That's, so I remember even half those steps. Yeah, you walk up a lot of steps, depending on your age, and if you exercise or whatever, you're walking up 67 steps. You can get winded, depending on your age and where you're holding with all that. Okay. So like at some point decided like, shouldn't be that winded. I'm not that old, right? Even though I look old, but it shouldn't be that winded. Either case, it was a good reason to start exercising more, let's say. Okay. But a person feels good, I'm not saying they can run marathons, but if they feel good, they can learn good. Right? It goes hand in hand. Right? It should go hand in hand because again, if a person's unhealthy in general, it affects a lot of things. It affects a person's ability to think, it affects a person's stamina, right? How long they can be in a certain position or whatever. So people say it's true, the older you get, Okay, depending on the person's going to have all kinds of, health issues, other things. It has an effect, right? Right? It does have an effect. Something that more of an effect, less of an effect. But the point is, right, as the Rambam says, it's a mitzvah to guard the body, right? Shomer es nafsho seicha. It's a mitzvah to guard the body. Very good. We got to take care of the body, right? As the Ramban says in the Book of Leviticus, chapter 19, the very beginning. We'll get there one day, I'm not sure when. That the Ramban says, or the Torah says, you should be holy because I, the Lord your God, am holy. Very good. All right, what does that mean? Rashi said, stay away from forbidden relationships. The Ramban says, you're allowed to eat, you're allowed to drink, doesn't mean you should, be obese and be an alcoholic. So you're allowed to eat, very good. You're allowed to enjoy a lot of things in this world. Some things may be unhealthy. Okay. So within reason. Again, does that mean a person can have chocolate and ice cream and all that? No. But should a person eat like a whole candy bar in one shot? I don't think so. Right? It's certainly not healthy. It might be good. It might fulfill other things by eating it. Okay, but there are people that want to get the benefit of both worlds. So what do? They eat a little bit. They want to eat a piece of chocolate. They'll eat, one square, maybe two squares. Like that's it. You have to have tremendous self-control. Or, a person eats, I don't know, a piece of cake, but you eat a small piece of cake. You say, well, I want a big piece of cake. Okay. You'll pay the price. So eat a little bit in order to fulfill that obligation. Okay. Right? But there's a connection here. There's a connection to, there's a connection to body and soul over here. Right? The healthier the body, the easier it is for a person to learn in general. Right? Because, the mind's going, the mind's working. You don't have anything, you could have distractions. We're not saying not. This is a physical distraction. Right? And a physical distraction, um, a physical distraction is worse. Why? Because, anyone can try this. God forbid if a person's in pain or they don't feel well, right? Pick up a book to learn. Try to listen to something. It's harder. Why? Because your mind and your body, you're dealing with other things. And once you're dealing with other things, it makes it harder. Right? It for sure, right? It for sure makes it, harder. Again, can there be other distractions if a person's totally healthy? Sure. There can be a lot of different distractions. But anyway, the first thing here says the Rabbeinu Bachai, the first thing is the fact that you have the soul in the body, right? And you continue to live. You continue to live, let's say with health, with good health, everyone should have good health, right, etc. Very good. And that's going to help keep you, keeping Torah mitzvahs, right? That's the first thing. What's the second thing? Second thing he says is life where a person got sick. Let's say a person got sick, and afterwards they were close to death. They were at the point of death, right? And what happens? They got new life. Similar to an old vessel that's old and worn out, and it gets refurbished. And it gets to the beginning of what it was before. Right? So I have a second level here, where a person says, the Rabbeinu Bachai person was sick, but it wasn't just like getting the flu, having a cold. They were deathly sick. Not only were they deathly sick, what happened to them? What happened to them? They came back. They came back as originally they were. In other words, before they got sick, there were no ramifications. There were no repercussions. What happened? They were at death's door. Whatever they had, right? They were at death's door. And what happened being at death's door? They could have died. They could have died. They came back to life. Right? They came back to life. So the rabbinical here says, what's it similar to? It's similar to a vessel, some sort of, a dish, a pot, a pan, I don't know, whatever it is, some sort of vessel that was old and worn out, and it was refurbished, and it looks brand new. And literally, it looks brand new. This is what happened to the person. Yeah, in other words, they got to the point where they were before they were sick, which doesn't always happen. Yeah, if someone's really sick, deathly ill, not that they feel, they feel they're at death's door. Like they're at death's door. Yeah, they're deathly sick. And what happens? Somehow through medication, treatment, whatever it may be, or just God took it away, whatever it is. However it works out, person comes back to life. Now, normally, if someone is deathly ill, I shouldn't say normally, whatever the case may be, if a person is deathly ill, what can happen? Let's say they're totally cured. They're totally cured. Now, do they go back to like they were before? I know someone who is literally at death's door. He got COVID, really affected him in a negative way. They intubated him for like a couple months. He was like unconscious for like 2 months. He's like in between worlds, basically. He may have been certain things from that world or whatever. I had a long conversation with him about it. But even when he came back, yeah, there were 2 months he didn't use his body. He had to learn how to walk, learn how to eat, learn how to do other things. His muscles totally atrophied. Now you can imagine you're sitting there doing nothing on a ventilator. Yeah. So, you're alive. I don't know, some people may not call it being alive, but you're alive, intubated. Yeah, but you're not using any part of your body. Physically, you're not using any part of your body. So he said when they brought him back, like a few months later, what happened? Took him a while, in rehabilitation. Couldn't walk, couldn't use anything. Couldn't use any of his muscles. I mean, it's a very hard thing to imagine. Right? But he didn't use any of his muscles for 2 months. For 2 months. Now, after all that, I mean, whatever, he's not going to be alive. I don't think there's any question. Yeah, he got out of it. He came out of it. Yeah, but he didn't come out 100%. Mind-wise, he's 100%. Yeah. There's still things that he can't do. He told me he went to I don't know, it was a bar mitzvah. It was a wedding. I think it might have been a wedding. And whatever, he knew how to get there basically, or the place wasn't either he knew how to get there, he wasn't so sure, whatever. And this place was, so when he finally got there, he didn't realize, this place has like, I don't know, 50, 60 steps to get to walk down. So, going down was easier. It's like, I ain't getting back up. It's like, so he had to think about this. It's like, how am I going to get back up? Like, physically wasn't strong enough to get back up. So you can tell me, well, you take one step at a time, you sit there and wait. He said it, like, he said it wasn't possible. Certainly at that point, it wasn't possible. And he probably couldn't do it today either. Yeah, so he lucked out because there was a group that came, I think, to this wedding. They came like a van or a bus, from some yeshiva or whatever. And he found out where they're going, whatever. They had extra place. He got in. That's how he got out. That's how he got out of this place, because he couldn't walk it. For him, it was impossible to walk. Yeah, but he wasn't paying attention till he realized, he's like, the only way I can get out of here is I have to walk back up the steps. And he's like, but I can't. He's like, I'm stuck here. Like, what am I supposed to do? There's no way for me to get out. Right? And as divine providence would have it, he saw that there was a van. Well, it wasn't I don't think it was a bus. It might have been a bus. He might have been a bus, I don't know. Whatever it was, a bus, a van, came with a whole bunch of guys, and he spoke to I guess he saw it come in, or he saw these guys come in. So either he spoke to somebody in charge, or he spoke to one who was driving the van. How long are they going to be there? Whatever. Can he get a ride just to get out of here? Because he says he's got no way to get out of there physically, right? So anyway, it's kind of a funny story in a third way. But anyway, in this case, what happened? This person literally, no joke, was at death's door. He was literally at death's door. Yeah. And he came out of it, right? 100%, right? 100% came out of it. Yeah. Now, the thing was, he came out, with his mind intact. His body, different issue. Body, a different issue. Yeah. So here, we're not talking about that. Rabbeinu Chai is not talking about that. Yeah. Rabbeinu Chai is talking about a case where he was sick, a person came out of being sick. They were at death's door. Literally at death's door. And they came back as good as they were before it happened. Now, there are times that can happen. That certainly can happen. I know somebody older, much older, friend of mine, that he had to have A's in his 70s. I don't think it's quite 80 yet, but either case, he had a stent put in his heart, and he flatlined. He flatlined when they were doing it. So they had to bring him back. So I said, great. I heard from one of his kids, or one of his son-in-laws, whatever, that this happened. I saw him at a bar mitzvah. I think I saw him at a bar mitzvah. Well, it was last year. So I said, yeah, I heard the story. I said, so tell me what happened. He said, it was on the table, and they had to bring me back to life. I said, so what'd you see? I said, you were in that world. What'd you see? He goes, I didn't see anything. I just saw the white wall. I go, that's it? I said, I could use this. This is great information. I said, did you see anything? He said, I didn't see anything. I saw the right wall. I said, I saw the white wall. Like, that was it. He didn't have any recollection of anything. Now, somebody asks, what was his dream like? So he remembered certain things. He remembered seeing different family members. Yeah, that he hadn't seen in a very long time. Like he was there, like his soul was there. Not that I don't think they were dead. I don't think did he see dead people? He might have. He might have seen some relatives that maybe recently passed away, or others. I don't remember 100%. He definitely there was a recurring dream, which he has no clue what it means, and I mean I don't have any better answer about I don't know being on some sort of boat, being on some sort of boat and being taken out of the water, and like he doesn't have any recollection, of anything of like, being in the ocean or maybe drowning or, any of these things. Maybe I don't know. Maybe in theory, it happened as a, in a previous life. Maybe something happened. I don't know. But he was witnessing it, but he felt like it was happening to him. But it's like he saw it. There are a few things. There are a few things. There are a few things like that. But the things that he did see, very hard to make sense out of what the purpose was, right? But there's one thing that's very clear. See, I always say, listen to a video of what someone had not body experience, what it's like. They see the life flash before their eyes, and this, they see everything they've done. They're drawn to this light. This didn't happen though. To him, it didn't happen, right? But he did know, and he did understand. He was like really in between both worlds. In other words, he could see his body there. His body was just lying there, but he couldn't do anything. Right? But he's also, so, usually a person has out of body experience, right? That's what happens. The soul hovers over the body. Right? Now, he wasn't dead, right? He never flatlined. I don't think he ever flatlined, but he was in between both worlds. Right? He said very clear he was in between both worlds. Right? Now, normally you have to be somewhat dead to be in that world. So okay, you want to say you're unconscious, even if a person's unconscious, we do understand they know what's going on. Right? And this many people have testified to because they came out of it. Obviously, if they didn't come out of it, they're not saying very much. Right? They'd be dead, obviously. But there are people who said that they were they could hear everything. They could hear everything was going on. There's a story of somebody that whatever, the young adult, probably in his 20s, a very bad car accident, and basically was in a coma. And he was in a coma for a long time. And he could hear everything going on. Right now, he came out of the coma eventually, but this is what he said, that his parents didn't know what to do. Doctors were saying, even if he comes out of it, prognosis is bad. May never walk again, be brain dead, other things, be whatever, it'll be bad. So they're contemplating what to do. Contemplating, should they just take him off, life support? They shouldn't take him off life support. Meanwhile, this person is lying there, hears everything. And he's screaming to the top of his lungs, no, don't kill me. Don't kill me. I want to live. But nobody heard him. Right? It's like a Twilight Zone movie or something, or episode, whatever. Right? Imagine the soul is screaming at the top of its lungs. Well, when the soul screams, you don't hear it. They say it's brought down in the Medrash that when you saw down a tree. Now, a tree you use for a lot of different things. You use it for wood, you use it to make paper, other things. There's a measure that says that when the tree gets sawed or things happen to it, it screams. Literally, it screams out of pain. Now, obviously, we're allowed to use the tree for whatever we want. We don't see there's any non-benefit to do that. Just like animals, we can use animals, as long as we don't abuse them. Scientific experimentation, cure diseases is permissible. Using their hide for leather, for alligator boots, other things is permissible, right? We don't, Judaism does not hold that is, that it's cruel, right? That's not cruelty. We're allowed to use them for our own benefit. Okay, right? You can eat them also, whatever. Yeah, in this case, the doesn't. You don't see anywhere it says you can't use trees or plants. Right? In other words, I can use them for whatever we want. Right? What's the problem? I mean, use them for good things, God forbid, use them for bad things, whatever it may be. But anyway, there's a medrash. What does the medrash say? The medrash says when a tree gets cut up or whatever, it screams. It screams. It screams out of pain. Yeah. So what happens? What happens? We don't hear it. Mankind does not hear the screams. Right? We don't hear it. In either case, that's what the Medrash says. The Medrash says the tree screams. Now, if the tree would make noise that we would hear, right? That a person would hear, you would never saw it down. Right? You would never cut it. There are many things to a tree you wouldn't do. But see, we don't hear it. We don't hear anything. Because if we would, what would happen? You wouldn't cut it. You wouldn't use it. Right? You definitely wouldn't use it. So therefore, God kind of makes a miracle there. And basically we're not going to hear it. Yeah, because if we would hear it, right? If we would hear it, what's going to happen? Right? What's going to happen is you'll never cut it. Right? You'll never cut it. You'll never do anything to it. You won't be able to get benefit from it. Because at that point, it's like your free will. It's like your free will is taken away. Yeah, but in the bigger scheme of things, it's a big miracle. If you think about it, because imagine if you would hear that. Well, I'll make a little bit of a distinction here. We read last week, or everyone read yesterday, Parshas Balak. What does Balak, one of the things talks about? It's conversation between Balak and his donkey. God allowed the donkey to speak. Okay. Now, interesting enough, animals do speak. They speak to themselves. We don't understand their language. It used to be there were certain great people that understood the language of birds. In other words, they could understand, what the birds were saying. So there's a Gemara that says that one of the rabbis, he overheard birds chirping, very good. He overheard them chirping, and they said, they mentioned his name, and he said he should get out of here, he should flee. It's going to be bad news if he doesn't flee. So you're going to say, come on, who listens to the birds? But he understood the language of the birds. It saved his life. Right? So there were people, Dr. Doodle, he can, talk with the animals. Okay, if you understand their language. If you understand their language, okay. But in general, most people don't understand the language of birds. They don't understand the language of what, animals say. They have their own language. Okay. Right? That's why the Torah says, when God breathed in the spirit of life, right? He gave the Aramaic translation, Uncle says, gave us a ruach memalelo, the ability to speak. Really, the ability to speak over there means to reason, to make decisions. Because the animals also speak. Okay, but we don't understand what they say. We don't have a clue what they say. In general. I remember, I still have a COVID minion from where I used to live. Like, I don't know, like a 3-4 minute walk from where I live now. And they've been in after Shabbos. They done Marv after Shabbos, evening service after Shabbos. So I remember a lot of times it's a tree between one of these buildings, and you hear a lot. These birds make a lot of noise. They make a ton of noise. Yeah. So I was always thinking I should be really thinking about other things, in the middle of prayer or whatever, right? But I was wondering, what are they saying? It's like the war over. We're gonna get attacked soon. Like, what are they saying? I'd love to know what they're saying. Maybe not, but I always have that curiosity. But we don't. Nobody speaks their language now. It doesn't mean back in the day people didn't. There were people. I'm not saying everybody, certainly not, but there were people that understood the language of the birds. Right. So that definitely, did exist. But imagine such a scenario. Lumberjack is out there, takes out the saw, right? Takes out the saw, starts, cutting down the tree. All of a sudden, as he starts to cut, he hears like wild screams. Can you imagine? Right? Wild screams. Right? You never saw it. You never cut down a tree ever. After you hear that. So in this case, what happened? Let's get back to the story here. What happened? So this guy was basically on a respirator, and his parents were thinking, like, there's no point. Let's just pull the plug. And this guy was screaming, like, don't kill me. It's murder. Don't do it, whatever. And in the end, they decided not to do it. For whatever reason, decided not to do it. And sometime thereafter, he came out of it. I don't remember, if he needed rehabilitation or how much rehabilitation, whatever, he came back. Came back as is, right? As far as I remember. But this is what he told. He said his soul was there, heard everything, saw everything. No one could hear him. Wasn't like selective hearing. Nobody could hear him. Yeah, so that's what it means. The soul is out of the body, right? It's out of the body. Now, it doesn't mean the person necessarily died yet, right? The person could be clinically dead, right, at that point. And then God can either decide to put the soul back in the body or not. And this could go on for like a few minutes, and then all of a sudden, boom, the soul goes back in the body, right? So like there is a certain amount of time. It's not a lot, right? But there's a certain amount of time if a person's clinically dead before they get a pulse, depending how much time has transpired, what are they going to look like when they come back? Are they coming back at full strength in general? Coming back at half strength, a quarter strength? Is their mind there? Right? There are a lot of factors here. A lot of things going on. Right? So, yeah, oxygen doesn't get to the brain, right? Over a certain amount of time. It's not a long period of time here. The person can be tremendously damaged over here. Can have tremendous brain damage here. Right? So, a person can be out, a minute, let's say a minute and a half, something. And let's say all of a sudden, we got a pulse. Yeah, they get a pulse. It's not working. Whatever. What does it mean they got a pulse? According to this, what it means is that really they were clinically dead. The soul goes out of the body, so we understand. And then why'd they get a pulse? How in the world they get a pulse back? They're working, they're banging, and this and that, trying to get what do you call it? Defibrillation, whatever. They're doing all these things to bring the body back, right? To bring the person back. And, try once, try a second time, right? They're working. You say, we got a pulse. How'd they get a pulse? Person was dead. Say, hey, come on, CPR. Didn't you ever learn CPR? Didn't you ever, learn any of these things? Okay. But even with that, what's looking at it from our perspective, from a Torah perspective, what happened in this case? Again, that definitely sounds like Twilight Zone. What happened over here? The soul went back in the body. God threw the soul back in the body. That's why I got a pulse. If God would not have put the soul back in the body, guess what would have happened? Right? Repeat after me. Yiskadav v'yiskadav. That's the mourner's prayer. It's over because the soul needs to be in the body. And if the soul ain't in the body can't live. Right? But you see, for a certain amount of time, right? If a person is clinically dead, the person could live. How can the person live? God puts the soul back in the body. That's how it works. Right? Or if God did not put the soul, let's say, back in the body, what happens? Person dies. Right? Very clearly, the person very clearly the person dies. Right? So it is what do you call it? It is interesting. It's interesting how all that works. Because again, many people have told the same story, right? Man, woman, Jew, non-Jew, right? They tell the same story. When they've had, an out-of-body experience. They know the soul is hovering over the body. They know they're not just the body. Right? Now, is that going to convince someone all of a sudden to be religious, Christian, Buddhist, Muslim, whatever? No. But what does it show? If they're saying from a cross spectrum, black, white, Hispanic, doesn't matter, male, female, young, old, but they're all saying similar things. At the very least, that the soul hovers over the body. What does that tell you? You're not just your body. Right? If you're not just your body, now you're this entity, whatever it is. What's that entity? So we call it the soul. Right? We understand it as the soul. Well, what does the soul do? Right? What's the function? Well, guess what? This person's going to understand there's another world. Right? Again, it sounds like the Matrix. Right? There's another world. There's another parallel world over here that we don't see, that we don't fathom. Yeah, there are people, let's say, someone asks, can some people have like a sixth sense? Some people like hear, what was it, hear the trees or hear birds or understand what the birds say. Yeah, the people sensitive who can hear the trees. I don't know anybody. I mean, and if someone, I would tell you, if someone says they could, you'd probably, send them to an insane asylum. Yeah, it shouldn't be common. Right? It shouldn't be common. There's a heavenly voice. Nobody hears this either. There's a heavenly voice that goes out every day and says, "Woe to my children, don't learn Torah properly." We don't hear that. We certainly don't hear that. Are there some people that hear it? Listen, there are some great people that have worked on themselves for many, many years that have the lowest form of prophecy. What's the lowest form of prophecy today? It's called divine inspiration. It's called Ruach HaKodesh, right? Divine inspiration, a very, very low form of prophecy, right? There are great rabbis generation that have it, right? They certainly have it. There's certain things I know. One of my rabbis said about one of the Torah giants, the last generation, he said there was certain, I don't know, he was buying for something. He said there was a certain thing that's impossible. He said, impossible according to logic, that this person should have known. There was information that this person never should have known. How'd he get it? So again, maybe a little birdie told him, maybe, but where did he get the information from? Yeah, where did he get it from? Does it come from divine inspiration? There's certain things I heard my Rebbe say. I don't know where he got it from. Right? I'll give an example. I'll give an example. A week before October 7th. My Rebbe spoke 3 times during the intermediate days of Sukkot, and he told the same story 3 times. What was the story? The story was that he was learning by Moshe Schneider, a blessed memory, one of the main students of Chofetz Chaim, and he was learning by him during World War II. When the lot of yeshiva students heard what was going on, and how many people being killed and slaughtered, whatever, and they said, how can we go into Simchas Torah? How we go the last day of Sukkot, which is really a separate holiday, sing and dance on Simchas Torah? We know families could be getting destroyed and whatever. So Moshe Schneider said, Hitler, Yamach Shemo V'Zichron, may his name be blotted out, may he rot wherever he is. Yeah, he can destroy our bodies, he can't destroy our souls. And then they all went, they danced like, you can't imagine. My Rebbe told this story 3 times. 3 times before anything happened. Now, one of the times he spoke, I was going to go, and whatever, I didn't get a chance. I didn't get a chance to go, but I would have asked him or somebody, why is he telling the story now? Right? The intermediate days of Sukkot and Sukkot in general, it's a high time. People sing and dance and whatever, basking in God's glory. It's a tremendous time of joy. Tremendous time of joy. Yeah, people singing, their bands, all kinds of things going on. Yeah, very good. What are you talking about that? That would have been my question. Like, why bring this up? Why bring this up now? So it came out that he, well, actually, before I get to that, when people heard this, many people said to me, they said, I didn't know he had divine inspiration. I know he had Ruach HaKodesh. I said, come on. There were certain things he told me. 20 years ago, I could have told you that. 25 years ago, certain things he told me. I could have told you that. right? But what was the punchline here? What was the punchline? The punchline was that he felt something was coming. His soul felt something that was coming in a major negative way, based on what was going on here, right? In the unlawful hatred, what was going on? Demonstrations, against Netanyahu's government took over, and they're going to cut down powers of the Supreme Court. It's not a bad thing. Stick their nose in where it doesn't belong half the time, right? And whatever. So they had counter protests against that. Yeah, so imagine you have a system, just throw this out there without to get into politics. Yeah, imagine you have a system set up where when you have retiring Supreme Court judges, who are the next Supreme Court judges to go in? Right? What's the criteria? Who appoints them? The Supreme Court. The Supreme Court appoints their own judges. That doesn't sound so good. In other words, they can put in the same people, similar people, etc., that fit their agenda. Okay. Right? But, no country, unless it's a rogue country, unless it's, like a dictatorship, would allow such a high body, i.e. the Supreme Court, to stick its nose where it doesn't belong, a million times. They can strike down anything. Like, let's say the Knesset makes a law, whatever. Supreme Court says, no, it's unconstitutional. We knock it off. Like, they have the power to do that. It's crazy. There's no balance of powers here. Like you have in the States, some other place. You don't have a balance. Right? So what do they want to do? They want to curb it. They want to give them a right every single time to knock things down, and you can't do anything. Right? It makes it almost impossible to legislate anything. Because you legislate something, they knock it down. Because it doesn't fit their agenda. You legislate something else, they also knock it down. Right? So I remember someone came here, someone I know came to visit, there for months. Whatever, they come 5-6 months a year. And they put a picture on Facebook, of them at this demonstration. Whatever. So I saw them, so I said, Greg, what are you doing there? He said, it's democracy. I said, I understand it's democracy, but I said, what are you doing there? What are you doing? You're protesting with all the leftists. Okay. I said, do you understand what you're protesting against? Do you understand? I mentioned this many times when this came up. Many times. People open up their mouths, they say, get a right to demonstrate, and it's fascist, and it's this. Do you understand what they're doing? Do you understand what the power of the Supreme Court is and what they're doing? Everybody and their mother should say, yeah, everyone agrees it needs to be toned down. That no one disagrees. Oh, but you got to take it too far. What are you going to do? Get rid of some of the cronies? Yes. Right? Take away the system where the cronies put up other cronies. Yeah, that's what you do. Right? Because if you don't do that, you're going to have the same thing perpetuating over and over and over again. And that's how you're going to keep them in power. It doesn't change. I said, this would never last in the U.S. Never. You give a body that kind of power? Like a dictatorship, almost. Yeah? Fascist. They can knock down anything at any time. What do you mean? That's insane. Maybe within reason. Some things I could hear. They wanted to make, I'll give an example where the jurisdiction went too far. I think that there was a case where I think it went to the municipality, and then I think it went to the Supreme Court. There was a case where during Sukkot, we want to have a concert somewhere in some, I don't know, it wasn't such a religious city per se, but there were religious Jews there. They wanted to have a concert. They were separate seating. Separate seating between men and women. Right? That was obviously one of the conditions. The singer's going to come. He'll sing to a mixed crowd, but they can't be together. They have to have separate seating. They have to have a pizza. Yeah, they have to have separate seating. People went up in arms. People were up in arms. He can't do that. What do you mean he can't do that? That's the condition. You don't want to go, don't go. What happened to freedom over here? The municipality or whatever, the courts got involved. It says it's unconstitutional. What do you mean it's unconstitutional? People are going, paying money paying money to go to an event, and they are going under the auspices that, first of all, the religious thing are fine. Yeah, some people probably wouldn't have such an issue with that. And they're going under the pretense it's going to be separate seating by choice. Who's putting a gun to their head and saying separate seating or die? Nobody's doing that. They struck it down. So you can't do that. You can't do that. That's offensive. Who gives you the right to say it's offensive? You need the courts to tell you that's offensive? In a Jewish state? Really? And people are paying money to go to it legally? That's insane. That is literally insane. They don't have a right to get involved in that. It has nothing to do with them. There's nothing to do. Oh, people complain. It's sexist. So don't go. Right? Reminds me of a story. Somebody I know, it's a relative actually, through my wife. Whatever, it's a relative that, in their building, they have a Shabbos elevator. Now, some people there aren't religious, let's say. Let's get a vote. Right? This person's a mega leftist. Right? Big time leftist. Yeah, let's say I'm being generous here. And what happened? They got outvoted. So what happens when you get outvoted? You lose. Because they put in a Shabbos elevator. Now, if you look at the Torah, which they could care less about, but if you look at the Torah, Exodus chapter 25, verse 2, you go after the majority. Right? So what happened going after the majority? I didn't like the end result. Who cares if you didn't like it? Yeah, that's the majority. Majority spoke. You lost. Right? Majority spoke. People hate Trump and everything else. Majority spoke. No fix, no nothing, no conspiracy theories. Right? That was it. Majority spoke. Oh, we don't like it. Okay, you don't like it. Fair and square. We're not talking about illegal things. Like in other countries where more elections are more fixed in certain places. Okay. Fair is fair. You lost, take it. Deal with it. 4 years, 8 years, whatever it is, deal with it. You don't like it, you vote him out of power. Or her out of power. Okay. But you lost. So what are you complaining about? You can't say religious coercion. Not religious coercion. Religious coercion is against your will. What some people claim here, you can't close down the roads, on Shabbos, and I have the right to drive if I want to drive, blah, blah, blah. That makes a bigger problem. I understand why it's done, but it makes a bigger problem. Okay, this is not religious coercion. You had a vote. There are 50 people there, and the majority won. Right? The majority won. So you're stuck with the Shabbos elevator. Okay. It's inconvenient. It stops at every floor. Okay. So walk. So walk down the steps. You go to the fourth floor, walk. So don't use it. But it's not the elevator itself. It's the whole thing of religion. And we have to uproot religion because we don't want religious people to do X, Y, and Z. That's the fight today. Right? That's the fight. You have the same thing. You have the same thing in the army today. What do they want? Right? They're making it illegal for people to learn Torah. Where do you ever see such a place? Now again, back in the day, they didn't need people. They did not need people in the army. It's very clear they didn't need people. Today may very well be a different issue. Right? May very well be a different issue. But the same standard sticks. And what's the same standard? The same standard is they want to make us like them. That's what they want. That's what they want. They'll say share the burden and very good. It sounds very nice. And everyone has to help out and people are out too long. What do you call it? Patrolling and doing it good. I hear that. That's not the issue. That is not that's an issue now. But it wasn't an issue 20 years ago. It wasn't an issue 30 years ago. The same thing sticks with saying, you got to share the burden. But if you want to, if you have an obligation to share the burden, let's say it's true. Let's say it's true. Everyone should go to the army. Let's say. Yeah? What if you don't need them? What if there are plenty of people you don't need them? So what's the slogan? The slogan is you got to do what we do. You got to be like us. That's the slogan. We want you to be like us. It's not about defending. It's part of it, but it's not it. Because they don't need you. They don't need the manpower. Now, today, you probably can't use that argument. That argument falls by the wayside because after October 7th, you need more manpower. Okay. Right? But without even getting into that, but what's the goal? What's the goal? The goal is they want to uproot anything that has to do with Torah. Right? And this, my Rebbe would say is the biggest fear. Is the biggest fear what the Zionists are doing. Right? And that is now they're making it illegal to learn. Yeah, they're going to take away certain subsidies. They're going to take away other things, which, it's not going to get people to join. They're making certainly a big mistake with that, right? But even so, every other nation in the world has divinity exceptions. Everybody, even Pharaoh, for goodness sakes. Yeah, Pharaoh back in the day in Egypt. Where the Levites and the Kohanim go to Goshen. They were separate. They weren't taken captive like everybody else. Even Pharaoh understood that. You have a clergy exemption. The only country that doesn't understand that is the Jewish state. It's mind-boggling. Now they'll say, no, we don't. It's not we don't understand it. We do understand it, but you don't need so many people learning. That's the argument. You don't need so many people. So okay, so where do you draw the line? You take 2,000 of the best students. Where do you draw the line? This is a divine protection that's saving them, which even people in the army know. But let's take it a step further. The police, the military police are telling you the jails are overcrowded. Yeah, they have no room for people. Now, even if they want to go door to door, and people are not going, when they get drafted and they don't go, and they're quote unquote draft dodgers, okay, and then they go looking for where are they going to put them? They talk out of both sides of their mouth. It doesn't work, right? On the one hand, you say we don't have any room. There's nowhere to put them. On the other hand, you're going to say we're going to take them. The army doesn't even want that. They got many more things they need to do. Then go after people. So that's a bigger fear, a much bigger fear. In other words, you're running after people sitting and learning Torah, trying to protect you spiritually, and you're causing them great pain, by what you're doing, and you're hounding them, and now, people can't leave the country, right? You got people like that because, they think they're going to flee and they'll never come back. Right, they'll never come back. So now you got, let's say, Israeli born. They want to see family. They want to go somewhere. I don't know. They want to go somewhere. They want to travel somewhere. Now you get a problem. Now they're putting on everyone's, in everyone's file. They're going to say if you're a draft dodger, you don't leave the country. What are they afraid of? What are they afraid of? They're afraid they'll never come back. Religious Jews are going to come back. They're not leaving. Right? The vast majority of people that leave Israel are secular Jews. The vast majority. I'm not going to say no religious Jew ever leaves here. After being born here. The vast majority are secular Jews. Nothing to talk about. Right? Absolutely nothing to talk about. So what are they worried about? They'll say, okay, if you want to leave, we'll let you come back. Put $5,000 aside. Put $10,000 aside. Put a bashkon. Put some collateral up that you're going to come back. That's fair, right? Most people aren't living the lap of luxury. So make them do something. That obviously they're not going to want to lose this. Now, if you're talking to someone who's making wealthy, they're not going to do that, right? That's kind of stupid because they have plenty of money. Okay, right? But when you're running after yeshiva students, and that's like how you're being saved in this country. Besides, you need the army. No one says you don't need the army. Everyone agrees. You need people to pray for them. You need both. Okay. Even the time of King David, you needed a standing army. He had great rabbinic figures there during this time. You still need a standing army. Okay. right? But if you're doing that, in God's backyard, and you're saying that it's illegal, you're making it illegal and making it much harder for people to study Torah. Yeah, which is going to be to your benefit, by the way. Right? He's been screaming about this for a long time. He's not the only one. Other people also. That could make God very angry. Right? Makes sense. You're running after people that want to sit and learn Torah. Why is that illegal? Why should that be illegal? You'll say they got to share the burden. Some people are. We're not saying nobody's serving. There are people that are serving. Okay. You're going to say, but it's a drop in the bucket. Okay. The drop in the bucket. Granted. Even if you want to say that. Yeah, but see, this is the fear. The fear is if you do that, and you're in God's backyard, and you're running after your Shiva students, and now they can't learn because of X, Y, and Z that you're doing, that I think could get God a little bit ticked off. Right? If I were playing God, I put on my funny George Burns glass and my funny mustache, and I looked out and said, "That's how you treat Shiva students? Because you're a communist? Because you don't believe in Torah? Okay, I'll show you. God forbid tragedy could happen. Could happen here, God forbid, it could happen other places. Right? That is security. And security is you got people sitting and learning. And the more people sitting and learning, the better. And people make this, just throw this out there on this rant, right, on this topic. People make it sound like, you have thousands of people, sitting and learning. Now you do, if you're going to include, elementary schools, right, and yeshivas, yeah. There are, let's say you have 150, 180,000 students, more, probably more than that. Okay. Right? How many people, they say, oh, look how many people sitting and learning. Let's, sitting and learning meaning they're not working. So let's do the math. I like this type of math. Yeah, let's do the math. How many people over the age of 25 are sitting and learning full time? 25. Right? So the Mir Yeshiva in Jerusalem, you have, I don't know, 4,000 students. Probably have more than 6,000 students, let's say. Panovich, you have another 4,000 students. Let's say the Mir in America, I don't know, yeah, let's say 300, 400 students in all the places in the world, in America, in Canada, in France. Yeah, all the, big places that have Jews. Yeah, and in Europe, wherever. How many people over the age of 25 are sitting and learning? Full time, they're not working. Right? That's the claim. Right? That is the claim. They're going to say, look at all the people sitting and learning. Okay, let's do the math. We just said, let's say between Panovich, Yeshiva, and the Mir, you got 10,000, let's say. Lakewood, I forgot Lakewood. Lakewood, you got, let's say, 3,000. So let's say you got 13,000. And everybody else combined, let's say, I'm in a very generous mood. Let's say there are 50,000. It's a joke. Yeah, not even close. Let's say it's 50,000 over the age of 25. I'm going to show you where these statistics are skewed. Let's say it's 50,000. Yeah, but it's a joke. It's probably not even half that. But let's say 50,000. How many Jews live in the world today? 14.5 million? More? If you do the math, it's like 0.01. It's like 0.5%. It's 0.5%. So people make this claim, and again, this is the problem with fact checkers because they don't fact check, and they don't really care about the facts, most people. So they say, well, look at all the people sitting and learning. It's not even 0.5%. So that's not the issue. We got to get more people sit and learn. Because they say, oh, look at all the people sitting and learning, not working. 0.5%? You're going to complain about 0.5%? That are quote unquote not the workforce? Really? If you want to tell me it was 20%, if you want to tell me even a bigger dream, it'd be 40%. 40% of ultra-Orthodox men over the age of 25 is sitting and learning. 40%. Then we have an epidemic. Then we'd have an absolute epidemic on this. But you're not even talking 0.5%. Right? You're not even talking 1%. How in the world They say, look at how many people sitting and learning. Yeah, now if you look at the numbers, those numbers are skewed. Because those people sitting and learning, 15, they're 16, they're 12. All these people, yeah, you have hundreds of thousands of people like that. Very good. Yeah, they're all getting, they're not all the army eligible. Now they use a number like 100,000, 50,000, right? Let's say. But out of the people that are married, that are sitting and learning over the age of 25, even they're not married, let's say. Because one of their big claims years ago, right? And they'll still say the same thing today. I don't think it's any different. They'll say the exact same thing, that you have too many people sitting and learning, nobody's working. It's not true. Statistically, it's not true. The vast majority of Jews out there in Israel and everywhere else over the age of 25 are working. Maybe learning, working, whatever, but they're working. So where are the Jews are? Where are the other Orthodox Jews not working? Where are they not working? But they use such an absurd thing. Statistically, it doesn't hold water. They think by the budget. They say, oh, look at how much money now they stop giving to yeshivas also. Look at how much money all the yeshivas get. Now what they have a budget of, I don't know, $10 billion, $50 billion. Yeah. So also in the bigger scheme of things, how much do they get? 0.25%? 1%? I think they get 1%. 1% of the budget. 70% of the budget, where does it go? To military expenses. I get it. You want to tell me 1%, you're jumping up and down? Secular universities get more than that. They for sure get more than that. And bigger stipends also. Like nothing to even talk about. Right? It's a hatred. It's an absolute literal hatred of Torah. And people who want to sit and learn Torah. Because the statistics, they can't back up these stats. But they keep saying the same thing over and again. Look at how many people sitting and learning. Yeah, it looks like a big number. It looks like a big number. Well, what's the reality? What's the reality on the ground? You got to sit there, and say, oh, look at all the money they get, even though they're not giving it now. Look at all the billions of shekels they get. If they get 30 million shekels, let's say a year, 40, 50 million shekels, whatever it is. Okay, it's a significant amount. It's a significant amount. But if it's 1% of the budget, you can't make such a claim. You can say, oh, but it's a big number. It's a big number. You want to see where the other breakdown goes? You want to see what, college students get? They ain't getting 1%, I guarantee you that. You want to see, let's say, radio, radio stations and all that. You want to see what they're getting and how they're getting helped? Yeah, oh, that's different. That's, it's giving over news and Lashon Hara and all these other things. Of course they're going to deserve. They should get a big part of the budget. Thank you very much. Yeah, 1%. And you got a 0.5% of people over the age of 25, sitting and learning full-time and not working. Yeah, so that's not the question. The question is, how do we bolster the masses? How do we get more people out there to sit and learn? Right? But it looks like a much bigger number. It's a joke. Right? It's an absolute joke. Right? So, person's got to take these things, you got to take these things in stride, because that's a bigger fear. Right? That is a much bigger, that's a much bigger fear, because we're doing it, we're doing it to ourselves. Somebody asks, someone says, first of all, about the concert with separate seating. Who gets better concert seats, men or women? I don't know. Good question. Right? I think they're equal. I don't think there's any favoritism. Right? Who's going to get? You pay more, you get better seats. But again, I don't think in that sense going to be any. I don't think it's going to be any different. Shields overcrowded with draft orders. No. What was meant to be said was jails are overcrowded in general. It's like in a lot of places, right? It's like a lot of places, jails are overcrowded. Yeah, okay. But the claim is the military is saying, or the police are saying, what are you going to go after these draft dodgers for? We got nowhere to put them. Why do we have nowhere to put them? Because the jails are overcrowded, not with draft dodgers. They're overcrowded with other people, other criminals, right? They got no room for them, so where are they going to put them? right? It's what I always say. People, first of all, they don't think things out. They don't think things through, and they talk out two sides of their mouth, right? They're gonna say, "Oh, we're gonna put these draft dodgers we're gonna put them in jail." Okay, but you got nowhere to put them, right? And the police don't want them. Police got other things to do. They don't want to run after these people, right? But there's no room. Not because of draft dodgers. There's no room because there's too many criminals. There's no room. Very good. It's insane. Yeah. Now, usually the draft dodgers not, first of all, they're not usually there for that long, right? They might be there for a week, for 2 weeks, whatever. But last week, there were a bunch of protests disrupting traffic and all that different parts of the country because whatever they got somebody and put them in jail. So and it's not like they're putting them in places where they're not with worse people and other criminals and and whatever. They're not getting what they need also. And I don't know, someone told a story about supposed to get tefillin, you couldn't pray and this and all kinds. Okay, whatever. There are issues. There are issues, but you can't. You cannot logically talk out of both sides of your mouth at the same time, which people do. And politicians are very good at that, right? That's what people do, right? So on the one hand, you say the jails are, too filled. We got no room. On the other hand, you got people going to say, but they have to go to jail. So where are you going to put them? Where in the world where are you going to put them? So when I imagine the kosher council, you just divide it right down the middle, right? Right. But imagine it has to go to the courts because it's unconstitutional. Can't do that. Discrimination against women. They have no jurisdiction. Where do you see a court in that case has jurisdiction? So you say people made a petition, right? And it's illegal. Why is it illegal? It shouldn't even go to a court. Shouldn't even go to the courts. Courts should have no jurisdiction here. People are against it, so don't go. Anyone tell you have to go to a separate a separate seating concert? No, no one said you. Oh, it's discriminatory against women. Okay, so don't go. Who said you have to go? It's one night, so don't go. Protest outside. Okay, so protest. You don't like it, right? But say go eat kugel. It's a legal thing. People pay money to go to these things. So what are you complaining about? Take it to the courts. Well, the courts have a right. You got to go to a secular court about a religious event. Really? They have no jurisdiction. They have zero jurisdiction over here. Someone who says definition of politician, personally, right, professionally talks about both sides of the mouth, right? Yeah, it's very common. Right? It's very common. The problem is when it's done, against religion. That's the problem. Right? That is the problem. Someone asked, all right, let's go back to body coming back here, body and soul. Somebody asks, if when my body dies, does my soul come back in a different body? Yeah, that's by resurrection. That would be by resurrection. Right? After the Messiah comes, after seemingly the world's destroyed and comes back, right? It'll be a different body. We don't know, right? We don't know what at the end of the day, we don't know what type of body it's coming back to. Okay. But yeah, the soul is gonna come back, right? If a person merits it, the soul will come back. Right? It's gonna be a different body. What type of body, nobody knows. Right? But the soul will come back to some sort of body. Someone says if Israel's anything like the US, prisons are money-making enterprises. All right. Again, the further a Jew, and this is the only reason it's going to happen, the further that a Jew goes far away from their tradition, then most likely there's a good chance again, I'm not gonna say everybody, but there's definitely a very good chance they will do things that are illegal, right? Which makes sense because you don't have a moral compass, right? You don't have a moral compass. Do these draft drivers get access to Torah? Not so much. That's the problem also, even if they go to jail. Someone was complaining that kosher food was an issue. People complained, they could make phone calls like other people did. They couldn't get religious articles. There were complaints like that, right? There definitely were complaints like that. If it's a jail, person should hopefully get what they need. If they, God forbid, if they're there, kosher food, kosher books. I'm not saying, going to set up a yeshiva in jail per se, right? You're not going to go that far, but in general, they should have access to certain things. They should have access to certain things. They can make it, very hard for you, and they have to, you have to petition, you have to speak to the right people, and then this, and they could do that, but at the end of the day, it should make it somewhat, accessible. They're not going to hold them that long either. It's not like, they're holding them for months on end. I mean, what's the maximum I think they hold them? It's like a couple of weeks. I don't think it's more than that. But even so, right? Even so, they don't want them. There's so many other things that the police can do, that the police need to do, and the army needs to do. More than this. But it became such a politicized thing that it just went off the charts, went off the rails. Totally, went off the rails here. That's one of the things bringing down the government also, potentially. I mean, probably government is going to be brought down, by the religious parties because they never set up a law, a proper law. But what they want more than anything else is to make it illegal for them to do this. That's what the religious parties want. I mean, whatever, the religious Zionist parties want everyone to join the army like everybody else. Okay. But the other Orthodox parties want this to stop. Running after yeshiva students should stop. Treating them like second-class citizens should stop. Go back to giving them subsidies that they need and everything else. Right? But that's making war. They say, oh, you're not going to do this? We're going to do this. Right? So again, part of me would say, okay, so don't rely on the government. Don't rely on the government for what do you call it? For money. For your institutions. It's going to be harder to raise money, true. Right? And there are great rabbis go every year, because it's a shortfall, more than $100 million. So they've been raising that kind of money, over the last couple of years, because of the hardship, because people are under tremendous hardship. It's not going to stop them, right? So that's the mistake also, is that they think the more hardship they do, they're going to cave in, right? That other Orthodox Jews will cave in, and that's it. That's what they think. But obviously, no one's caving in over here, right? No one's caving in. But again, I would say, like my Rebbe's institutions, all those institutions, they don't take money from the government. Okay, they have to raise it. It's harder. 100% is harder, right? But at the same time, remember, a few years ago, they said, okay, you're going to take money from us, from the government. We have a right. We have a right to say what should be in your curriculum. We say Bala Mea, Bala Dea, right? The one who has 100 or has money, let's say better, people want to listen to, like E.F. Hutton, right? Right? E.F. Hutton. And people say, okay, what does E.F. Hutton have to say? Yeah, so you have money, they have a right to say. So I remember, I told my Rebbe, I said, listen, so they have it coming. They absolutely have it coming. What are you going to make a protest about? They have it coming. They're taking money from the government. The government wants to have a say. So no, he said, it's better they don't get money from the government. Okay, it's going to be hard for them to raise some money. Okay. That I understand. That's very clear. So even if it's going to be harder, so what? So do not allow them to have a say in any curriculum. He said, you're right. He said, but you still have to protest. He said, it's still not right what they're doing. Right? Right? That's what it is. He said, you're right, but what they're doing is wrong. Right? What they're doing is absolutely wrong. So that's it. It's kind of a crazy thing. A person will say, okay, yeah, but this is again, if you're going to do that, they could say we have a right to demand X, Y, and Z in the curriculum. They could say that, right? New York State, they say all kinds of things what do you have to do for the curriculum. Sure. And some yeshivas get a lot of flack because they don't, adhere to that, or they're trying to make it as if what they do is equivalent in some ways. Okay, right. So again, it's they have a right to get certain tax brackets and different things. Okay, but they have a curriculum, so they want to say you're not doing enough in secular studies to fulfill that requirement. So what could they do? They investigate. What could they do? They say you're not doing enough. We're withholding money. They can do that, right? That'd be a tremendous hardship. Okay, but there are plenty of yeshivas that will not have secular studies or very little. Or very little. So that federal funding certainly helps. There's no question, right? There's no question. You can't pull a shtick though. If you're gonna have secular study, you have it. There are places that have it and they take it seriously. Other places that have it, they don't take it so seriously. Okay. Right? But at the end of the day, you got to meet requirements. So for anything, you have to meet requirements. But woe to the place if they're pulling stick and they're not doing what they're supposed to and they get caught. That's worse. Because as we always say, there's law of the land. You can't pull stick. Within reason. If it's legal, it's legal. If it's not legal, it's forbidden. Right? It's totally forbidden. So, the only saving grace is even if a person did it, they didn't get caught. That's a saving grace. Yeah, if they don't get caught. If they get caught, it could be very seriously a desecration of God's name. Not in the literal sense, but it could very well be a desecration of God's name. Yeah, that's bad. Right? That's bad. So most people will tell you, you don't mess with it. You do what the requirements say, within reason. And that's it. If you want the money, that's what you're going to do. That's the requirement. So obviously, they have the lawyers. They know what they can get away with, what they can't get away with. Different things. If you want federal funding, this is what you have to do. Right now, the question is, what does it mean? Now there are loopholes. What's the minimum amount you can do and get away with it? And all that. Okay, very good. Right, but if you get caught, you're not doing what you're supposed to do. They're going to clamp down right now tomorrow. Now, there were cases where the Board of Ed, which is getting rid of the Board of Ed, I think, or they got rid of the Board of Ed. Yeah, but they're witch hunting. They're witch hunting because they don't want to give money to these type of places that don't hold of their values. Makes sense. You're talking, millions of dollars. It's helping out a lot of schools, no question. Right, no question. But they're going to give it over with a fine tooth comb, and sometimes they're going to make demands that you can't hold by. Or make it too hard, or scrutinize. I've heard this before by people in the know. That's the Board of Ed or whatever were scrutinizing more than they should on their institutions, not on other institutions. In other words, proportionally, they're targeting, say Jewish schools or whatever. So I had a podcast recently about nonprofits and all this about who nonprofits can hire and how it works and different things. And one of the guests there was an accountant, and his main thing is working with nonprofits, so he's kind of an expert in the field. And he said at one time, I don't know, like 6 of his clients, all Jewish nonprofits, all Orthodox nonprofits, they all got audited at the same time. 6. So he knows the auditors and all that. So obviously, he's very meticulous, with all the books and everything else. So he's got nothing to hide and everything else. But he said to one of the auditors once, he said, "Why is it?" I said, six of my clients, all ultra Orthodox Jews, all non-profits get audited at the same time. They don't, like." You're saying tongue in cheek, and these people eat probably rusty nails for breakfast. It's like tongue in cheek. Well, you have no one else to go after. You're only going after, Jews or whatever. Like they got a snarl. Like that was it. It's like your group is more likely, to pull shtick than anyone else. Kind of a racist thing to say, right? Now, if you tell me proportionally that's true, it's still a snarl, let's say, right? But is it 6 in a row? You don't have anyone else to go after? And they passed all the audits. Every single one of them he passed. Flying colors, they didn't have anything. It's 0. That was one of the things he said. He said, if you're going to do it, you have to do it right. Because if you don't do it right, they'll nail you. Anything that looks funny, they'll flag it. They will flag it. So, it's not worth it to pull a stick. Even if you save a little bit of money. Still not worth it. Right? As this guru in real estate investing once said, if you're making money, pay the tax. Pay it. Don't try and hide it. Don't try this. Pay it. Because you're making, you should be able to make enough money anyway. So making enough money, you pay it. Pay it with a smile. Right? You don't have a problem with the IRS. Right? You don't have a problem with any of these things. It makes you look bad. Not just makes you look bad, makes Torah look bad. Makes Judaism look bad. Right? In general. Yeah. So, we want to be, as we always say, we want to be impeccable. We don't want anyone to make any claims. No claims. 0 claims. We want to have this person say, well, thank God, his father taught him Torah. Thank God his Rebbe taught him Torah. Thank God somebody taught him Torah. Yeah, we don't want to give them 1 inch, 1 iota of anything to be able to say anything negative against Torah. Yeah, but we're our own worst enemy, though. We make mistakes. We do things we shouldn't, right? We do things we shouldn't. And God forbid, as we mentioned many times, God forbid, not according to strict definition per se, but God forbid somebody gets caught. They get caught doing something. Sure. It makes the news. It's bad, right? Dog bites man. It's not a story. Nobody cares. It's a common occurrence. Man bites dog. That's a story, right? But unfortunately, as we mentioned numerous times, unfortunately, there have been Orthodox Jews in the news. They're caught doing things they shouldn't have done. And those things don't disappear. I'm not saying, they're coming up a dime a dozen, they come up, right? But they see, they're corrupt in this business. They're corrupt, doing this. So you have some people, trying to make a quick buck. They don't care, and it makes everyone look bad. Right? And that's what the Talmudic dictum is, that Kol Yisrael Ravim Zeh, all Jews are intertwined. So one Jew does something bad, right? A Jew, secular or religious is worse, because, religious Jews should know better. But in either case, all Jews look bad. You don't see that by any other group. A person can say, oh, Hispanic did this or whatever, so you hate all Hispanics. Right? Or blacks or whatever. It's being racist, right? Doing this against Jews is the same thing, but there's a difference. There's a major difference. The Talmudic dictum is, Kol Yisrael Ravim Zeh, that all Jews are intertwined. When all Jews are intertwined, that means one Jew does something wrong, secular or religious, everyone gets blamed. Doesn't matter. Everybody gets blamed. Yeah, for better or for worse. You don't see like an Italian did something in Brooklyn, did something wrong. Yeah, say, that's it. No more cannolis. Like we're gonna burn down the Italian flag. Never. I mean, maybe some people make some racist statements, okay, but in general, you don't see that almost against anybody except for Jews, right? And Jews are, for whatever reason, they're held to a higher, they're held on a higher pedestal, and by held on a higher pedestal, we have to be impeccable, right? As we always say, and if you're not impeccable, you're in trouble. You're in trouble. You do not want to give anybody 1 ounce of information to say that's negative, not one. Right? But when someone already has done it, it's bad. It's bad. Yeah, and it's very hard to undo the damage. I can tell you a number of people said certain things. So we said things to me, and I was like, well, you just included many other people, including myself. Like, well, you know what I meant. I know what they meant. Yeah, they threw Orthodox Jews under the bus. Everybody, they're making a distinction. Why is that not being racist? Being racist. 100% is being racist. Yeah, secular Jews do it all the time. Right? And they'll say, we do it all the time because we're saying all these things against them. All we want to do is be left alone. No one's out to fight for the sake of a fight. There are people that are rabble rousers. Yes. They enjoy getting in people's faces and arguing and whatever. Okay. The vast majority of people want to be left alone on both sides. On both sides. You're going to say you can't have a fight if you don't have the other side. You're right. Right? What's the statement? The statement is it takes two to tango. Yeah. Certainly does. But in the bigger scheme of things, things have to be called out. Can't hate another Jew in your heart. You can hate what they do. Can't necessarily hate the person unless, the person went under trauma or whatever. But in general, right? In general, that's going to be the case. Right? They say, oh, we can agree to disagree. Okay. It becomes personal. That's the problem. It becomes personal. You think Orthodox Jews are worried about what secular Jews do for the most part? Care less. As long as it doesn't affect them. Right? Now, again, we should have more influence and do outreach and all this. Very good. But at the end of the day, do we want to mix and do all these other things with them? No. We don't have anything to do with them. Because their values are skewed. The values are bad, most of them. I'm saying all values. A lot of their values are bad. Okay. So you move on. But see, that's the problem. Some people can't move on. Right? And here, when the friction is so strong between religious and non-religious, right? This is the problem. But why is it so strong? Why is it so strong here? Because all the people that came, quote unquote, the first Zionists that came were from the students of the Vilna Gaon. Right? That's for sure. Then you have other religious Zionists and secular Zionists. Okay. When the secular Zionists came, most of them were communists. They don't have anything to do with religion. Zero. Just the opposite. They want to get away from religion. They don't have anything to do with it. So their goal is to totally uproot Torah, and that hasn't changed. That's their goal. Regardless of whether they say, we spoke before, regardless of whether they say it's about share the burden or not, even if that's true at some level, what do they really want? They want Orthodox Jews to disappear. That's what they want. They don't want to feel guilty. They want to be able to do what they want to do and not anyone tell them, you're not allowed to drive your car on Saturday in this place. They don't want to hear that. That they call religious coercion. Right? They don't want that. They want to go far, far away from religion as possible. That's what they want. Right? If anyone's been to Israel except for being in religious areas, let's say like Jerusalem and Bnei some other places, you'll say it's no different than where you live. In any city. Almost. Very similar. Skyscrapers, highways, all kinds of things. Social things, whatever it is. Right? But what's the difference? Speak Hebrew, we have falafel better. Right? Falafel here is better. Okay. So what makes the land of Israel any different than anywhere else? What major difference? What's the major difference? Major difference is this is where God gave the Torah, right? Or God gave the Torah in the desert, brought everybody here. What was the point of bringing it here? Keep Torah mitzvahs. That was the whole point. It's to keep Torah mitzvahs. Yeah, and God, had Jewish people built a place for him, and then it got destroyed. Right? It's called the Beis Hamikdash. It got destroyed. We're going to commemorate that this week. Right? Thursday, fast the 17th of Tammuz, beginning of destruction. That's what it is. Yeah, they don't want to talk about that. Kids say, yeah, I learned about it in school. Okay. You're going to like mathematics, like any other academic subject, but that's no meaning. Right? It has no meaning in a person's life. I went to Hebrew school, I didn't hear anything about 17th Tammuz. Why? Because Hebrew school ends in June. 17th Tammuz is usually later. Usually. Yeah. Could be. Maybe you give the benefit of the doubt. Maybe I heard about it. I don't know. I don't remember. Never heard about Shavuos. Right? And Shavuos is even not in the summer. Right? So early school doesn't get out before then. Not in public school. Yeah, I'm going to like single most important day not be mentioned. Now, maybe it was. Maybe it was. We can commemorate it anyway. I don't remember. Right? But that's what they want. That hasn't changed the last 80 years in this state. Their goal is to uproot Torah. Clear. That's what they want. They don't want Torah here. If they could, they'd take us out and deport us. Nothing to talk about. Nothing to talk about. I'm not going to say everybody. I'm saying the big time leftists, yeah, nothing to talk about. Don't want anything to do with Torah. Zero. And sometimes the worst anti-Semites against Torah than non-Jews. They're mind-boggling in a certain way. So again, this leads back to the original point. God looking down is going to be happy? Is he going to be happy they're running after Torah students? No. And we have to be much stronger. And obviously, some people will say, well, there must be a reason. Maybe we're not doing enough in the Torah world. And if we were doing enough spiritually, that wouldn't happen. Could be. Very well could be. But there's that constant battle. Yeah, where you have the most holiness in the world, where the temple was, you have the most, impurity also. There are people here, I don't know, how much in vogue it is, right, or not. You have devil worship here in the land. Forget about, Tel Aviv being, king of the gays and all that. Right, you got, hundreds of thousands of people there of a different persuasion. It's also very bad. Because they live and let live. Again, you keep in mind, it's forbidden to do outside the land. There's no question. Even for non-Jews. You got to do it in the land could spit you out. That's what the Torah says. You don't keep what I say, God says, I can spit you out of the land. Now, it's very hard to imagine that would happen today. Yeah. But God could get so ticked off, he could say, okay. So, there's a measure that says that when the Messiah comes, we're not going to be here. We're going to be in the desert, right? Maybe that's figuratively, maybe not. Everyone's told me this, and he had a big smile. I'm like, what are you smiling at? If the Rav's around at the same time, when the Messiah comes, hopefully. I said, you're also going to be in the desert. It's hard to imagine that would happen. Maybe it's talking about spiritually, not necessarily physically, whatever. Whatever it is. Yeah, there's a major clash. And there's a major clash of values. I was learning something earlier about, 3 weeks, and the 17th Tammuz and all that. And the Gemara in Shabbos says, God gave the Torah to Jewish people. What did it create? Hatred. Hatred amongst the nations. Couldn't the nations have joined the Jewish people if they wanted to? Yes. They could have been part of it. Right? As Ramchal says in Derech Hashem, at least up until the generation of the Spurgeon, right? By the Tower of Babel, right? And the Ramchal said, "For God had mercy up until giving to the Torah Mount Sinai." Very good. They wanted to join; they could have joined. Now, God gave the Torah, they have to go through conversion. Okay. Why hatred? Right? What does the word Sinai mean? Comes from the word Samech Nun Yud or Samech Nun Aleph, means to hate. Brought hatred to the world. Didn't they have a choice? Didn't God go, the Gemara says in Avodah Zarah 2b to 3a, God went to all the nations asking if they wanted the Torah. Nobody wanted it. Come along, the Jewish people. God said, you want the Torah? Say, sure. You want to know what's written in it? Say, nah. Doesn't matter. Not Seven Ishmael. Right? We're going to do it, then we're going to hear what it's all about. But where's the hatred? Right? It's a mind-boggling thing. Why is there be hatred? They had a choice. They had free choice, 100%. They didn't take it, so now they're upset. Now they're jealous. What are they jealous of? You want to keep all my mitzvahs? Keep them. What are they jealous of? They had an opportunity, still have an opportunity. They want to join. Okay, now they have to go through conversion. But think about it a little bit deeper. What's going on? Why are they so upset? Why? Let's say better. Why would God give the Torah to Jewish people? And by giving the Torah, it's going to cause others to hate you in a major way. Right? Why would that be? Right? Why in the world would that be? I'll give you one simple explanation. I'm not saying it's the reason. Right? My opinion for what it's worth. Yeah. Why could that be? Because if a person wants to keep Torah mitzvahs, what do they have to do? What do they have to do? You have to attach yourself like no tomorrow. You have to work hard. Right? You have to work hard. You have to own Torah. What does owning Torah mean? Owning Torah means you can't take it for granted. You got to fight for it. Right? Anyone who converts has to fight for their Torah. Any Baal Tshuva, someone who comes back to Judaism, has to fight for Torah. Fight against family, friends, where they live, where they grew up, all these things. Right? That's part of the test. It comes along, God says, I'm going to give you the Torah, very good. But that's going to bring hatred from everybody. You'll say, well, I want a covenant. Where do I sign up? Beautiful. Where do I sign up? Why did God do that? Because really, what's Torah about? It's about giving your last breath for Torah. But doing everything in your power for the sake of Torah. Right? One of the hardest things to acquire. Torah, Olam Haba, the land of Israel. Right? It's a very hard thing to acquire. And people around you don't make it easy to acquire. Family, friends, others, they don't make it easy. They don't make it easy. Yeah, it could be, again, one possible reason for what it's worth. Could be God created all this hatred. Why? So you're going to attach to it more. And you're going to keep it better. And you're going to keep it to a higher level. And let anyone say what they want. Like my Rebbe would say, go eat kugel, you don't like it. Okay. I mean, I like kugel, right? So go eat kugel. Very good. You're going to fight for it. You're going to want it, as King Solomon says, more than anything else. Right? That's what you're going to do. Right? Otherwise, it won't stick. Because it'd be so easy, and you had it so easy, it's not worthwhile to keep. No challenge. Yeah, some people like easy challenges. Some people like things to be like really easy. Okay. If it's that easy, people are not so interested. Yeah, I can do that. No big deal. Something that's harder, takes more muscle, takes more brain power, that's worthwhile. Why? Because I actually have to do something. I have to work at it. It's not something's going to come automatic. Someone here mentioned, just want to answer this. Devil worship, why? That's the point. That is exactly the point. Yeah. And that is, what do I have? We said before, you have a place that has the greatest amount of Torah. Right? The greatest amount of Torah. The holiest place. But you have to placate Mr. X. The evil inclination, the angel of death, whatever you want to call him. So you got to allow him to have influence, or there can be negativity on the other side. The question is, how far does that negativity go? So you can have cults. There are two extremes, here in Israel. On the one hand, you come to Jerusalem. Everyone understands Jerusalem is different than everywhere else. You just feel it's different, right? Then if you go to Tel Aviv, very different. Yeah, two opposite ends of the spectrum. Doesn't mean it's not Torah in Tel Aviv. And don't get me wrong, Tel Aviv is holier than New York. Yeah, because it's in the land of Israel. Very good. A lot of bad things going on there. Okay. That doesn't mean it's not Torah. There is Torah there. Right? There definitely is Torah there. But you have a lot of really serious negative things going on at the same time there. Okay. So there's a clash. Right? There's a clash. But if there's so much Torah being learned at such a high level, in the land of Israel, how can you have that? How can you have that so strong against it? What's the answer? Because God has to placate the Satan. He has to placate Mr. S. Right? Evil inclination, angel of death, whatever you want to call him. You got to give him something. He's like, we're going to give him a lot of, he's not going to be happy that there's a lot of Torah being learned, and he's going to try and fight against that. Okay. But you got to give him more. That's not enough. You got to give him more. So what are you going to give him? You're going to give him the capital there. You're going to give him the capital of all the gays, Tel Aviv. You're going to allow them to, whatever. It doesn't work one way against the other. One way or the other. You have a lot of holiness. It doesn't mean the whole place is going to stay holy. It means you need other forces against that. Have to offset. Because what would happen if everybody here be learning Torah? Messiah would come. If everyone was doing what they were supposed to do, the Messiah would come. You can't have that. Right? Mr. S knows he gets slaughtered when the Messiah comes. He knows his days are numbered. So what is he going to do? He's going to make it so very hard for that to happen. Let people get distracted and get involved in all these other things, even in the holiest place in the world. Where's my problem? You tell me it happens in other places in the middle of nowhere, in Timbuktu, whatever, I understand. That I can understand. You want to tell me it happens in the Holy Land, right? Where there is so much Torah going on and so much learning, it's mind-boggling. 100% is mind-boggling. Right? But that's the way it works. That is exactly the way it works. Right? I got both things. I got on the one hand unbelievable amounts of Torah being learned, but that has to offset. You have to have other things against that. Right? Otherwise, Mr. S got a complaint. You make it so easy, everyone's on such a high level, you have to let me fight against them. And God lets them fight against them. But think about it. Okay. The only thing you have left, is the Western Wall. That was part of the temple. You have that outer wall left. Right? And people come daily. Thousands go to pray there. Yeah? And that's where God's home is. You get, take a 40-minute ride. You end up in Tel Aviv. You say, this is God's presence? Really? I mean, it's part of the land of Israel. No question. See people dressed or not dressed or who knows what. See a lot of craziness also. But there's a dichotomy. That is exactly the dichotomy. Right? You don't have one without the other. Right? In other words, if you have too much Torah, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? You can say too much Torah going to have a major influence on the world that could bring the Messiah. Oh, no. Can't do that. We don't want the Messiah to come. That means I'm out of a job. Mr. S says. Right? So even with any of these cults, they don't make any sense. Logically, they don't make any sense. Right? What do they expect to gain? No idea. Power. Some level of power. Why do people do sorcery? Sorcery is power if you know what you're doing. You don't have to be on a high spiritual level. I have to know certain incantations. You can have certain power. You can say, why would someone want that? Because they want power. It's not about meaning, I don't think. Right? They want something else out of it. They want some benefit. want to feel like they're doing something. I don't know. Yeah, imagine if you could say certain things and have power over angels. What angels could do for you. Yeah, tremendous. Yeah, it's like having a superhero right in your back pocket. Say, okay, take care of this person. Boom. Throw him off a cliff. Do this, do that, It's power. People don't want power, fame, sure. Who doesn't? Who doesn't want power? People want power. Get some more meaning in life, extra room from their step. Yeah. I know, you can say the same thing about idolatry. Like, everybody knows, even back in the day, the idols didn't do anything. They couldn't fight. They couldn't, they couldn't do anything. So why they worshiped them? It wasn't the rock itself they worshipped. It was the idea behind it, right? It's not so in vogue today. I mean, it is by the Christians and some others, but I'm saying that, idolatry is very strong, very, very strong. Yeah, we can't imagine what the power of it was. I think Ravashi saw Akav, right? So I don't know, saw him in a dream, whatever. And he asked him, how could you be so foolish to go after idolatry? That's already in his day, in Ravashi's day, is right before the Gemara got codified. Yeah. He asked him, how could you get so caught up in idolatry? And all the stupidity of idolatry. So he answered him, had you been in my generation, you would have been running after its coattails. We can't imagine such a thing. Now, why can't we imagine it? Because you look at it and say, come on, it's abracadabra, it's make-believe, it doesn't have any power, this and that. Forget about Christianity and other idolatry. This whole thing, we don't have, that idea has been like kind of nullified in a certain way. The running after idolatry. Yeah, there's paganism, there's, other types of idolatry. Again, we're not talking about, the same thing here, per se. But this is what he said. He said, you want to make fun of it, you want to say, we're just stupid and this and that. He told them, had you been in my generation, you would have run after its coattails. That's how powerful the idea was. Now, we don't have a clue what that means. Right? Today, certainly in the secular world, they'll make fun of it like no tomorrow. Come on. People worshiping idols, it's the whole thing about Torah speaks about idol worship and how bad it is. We don't understand the power of what it is. Right? But what does it do, though? What does it represent? So what it represents is taking God out of this world. That's what it does. Right? That's what it does. It gives something power that it doesn't normally have. That's what idolatry is. Right? Idolatry could be money. Idolatry could be food. Idolatry could be other things. Right? It's something that takes God out of the picture. It kind of weakens his power in the world. Now, if God is all powerful, how does he get weakened? Because how he's viewed in this world. You got a lot of skeptics, you got a lot of atheists. Even the majority of people, do believe in God. But what does it do on a regular basis? You got all these, all these skeptics, you got the media, you got the leftists, you got all these things going on, which literally takes God out of this world. That's what it does. Makes him weaker. Doesn't make his power weaker per se. God can do whatever he wants anyway, no matter what. Right? The idea of what he is and what he does, that's what it makes weaker. Right? Either of these things have no meaning. It makes it weaker. Because anything's going to take away from God that they're going to use as that kind of power, whatever it is, whatever the ego trip is, whatever it may be, that's a form of idolatry. Again, not in the literal sense. Certainly not in the literal sense. I don't think it's a coincidence that, the American dollar not worth very much in a lot of places today. But the American dollar is the God we trust. Kind of funny, written on a dollar bill. Right? Also not a coincidence, that, on 9/11, the Twin Towers got in. Yeah, the heart of, financial district in America. Yeah. So money is power. No question. People worship money. People worship people that have money. Again, I'm not saying literally, sometimes it is, right? But they, want to be like that. Why do you think there was they had an ad, years ago. I don't know if they still do or not, or at least on the package. Oh, Marble, they had the Marble Man, right? Cool guy, with the hat, with the, what do you call it, with the cowboy hat or whatever. Like, it's cool to smoke. So listen, you'd be like the Marble Man, right? You'd be cool. Someone asked, what's the angel of death? The angel of death is an angel. It's an angel that God appoints to take people's lives. Now, they can't take anyone's life, unless God wills it. So that means how's a person die? Won't get so gruesome here, but a person, it's explained where it's almost like a person is hit with a hypodermic needle. Yeah, and that extracts the soul from the body. In other words, it's like poison that goes in the body. It's kind of like a spiritual poison. I don't know exactly how to describe it, right? But it's like an injection that goes into a person where the soul feels absolutely suffocated and it can't breathe, right? So at that point, however that works, the soul goes out, right? So the angel of death, his goal is to get people to sin. That's why he's part of the evil inclination. He is the evil inclination. Tries to get people to sin, but at the same time, his message, he's a messenger. God uses him as a messenger to take people's lives. Now, he can only take people's lives when God says they're ready to die, right? When they are ready to die. So that can happen one person. That can happen many people, right? Were there 1,200 different angels on September 9th? I don't know. Could have one angel. Could have one angel do the entire destruction. You see that by Sodom. There were three angels dressed up as Arabs that went to visit Abraham. One to heal him, one to tell Sarah she's going to have a child. Rashi says, and the third is to overthrow Sodom. So we can have one angel that can do massive destruction. You don't need 9,000 angels to do that, right? I don't know how many, I don't know, circa back then, how many people died in Sodom, right? But you can have one angel, one angel that can have the power to destroy a whole city, destroy a whole country for that matter, right? That's how powerful some angels can be. So, did you need more than one angel, for 1,200 people to get killed? No. All you need is one. Could they have been multiple angels? Could be, but I don't think so. I don't, each angel has, is given a job to do. Right now, could it take more than one angel to do? Yeah, but I don't think God needs more than one angel to do that. But even so, an angel has one message. God gives it a message, says, okay, go do this. Go take care of this. The angel comes, does it, then what? The angel comes back for whatever it's supposed to do next. Right? That's it. It's a messenger. Right? But one thing you learn from the three angels that come visit Abraham, one thing you learn clear as day is that angels do not multitask. If an angel's given something to do, it doesn't do more than one thing, usually. Right? That's the way it kind of works out. Yeah, so were there 1,200 angels? No. I would think I would think God only needed one to do it. Right? You could say, wow, it must be a very powerful angel. Yeah. Right. It could be one very powerful angel. Could God use multiple angels to do it? He could, doesn't need to. God could take one angel, very powerful. That's it, bam. Totally wipe them up. Right? Totally wipe out the whole place. Seemingly, again, by Sodom, that's what happened. And one angel is going to overthrow Sodom. How many people live in Sodom? I don't know. I would think there were thousands. I would think. It was a thriving society. Definitely a thriving society. I don't think there were a couple hundred there. I think probably a significant amount. So you had one angel, one destructive angel. Yeah. One destructive angel that came and destroyed everybody. Yeah, how do I know? Rashi says. You had one angel come and destroy Sodom. Go one. One took in fire and brimstone. That's it. Make a concoction. Fire and brimstone, bam. That's it. Wipe them all. You don't need more than one angel to do that. Could there be multiple angels if God sent multiple angels to do it? Yeah, there could be. There could be, but he doesn't need to. There are angels of different proportions also. Some stronger, some weaker, different things. But in general, he can send one. That's it. That's all he needs. Right? But he could send multiple ones. Right? He could. He could say, okay, you guys take care of Sodom. Right? Two medium-sized angels. Go take out Sodom. Okay. But he could have done it with one. He for sure could have done it with one. Any other questions? All right, I'm gonna stop here. I do this every Sunday, 9 o'clock Israel time, 4 o'clock Israel time. Anyone has a question, find me on Facebook at Michael Coffman, Beyond Orthodox Conversion Judaism, OrthodoxConversion.com, Beyond Orthodox Conversion Judaism on YouTube. There you get videos, Q&As, ethics about fathers, Book of Leviticus. You want to send me an email, RabbiChaimCoffman@gmail.com, RBBI, CHAIMCOFFMAN@gmail.com, which